ArcGIS includes many capabilities to support a variety of logistical workflows in upstream oil and gas. In this example, let's explore how ArcGIS can support water management. Here in ArcGIS Pro, our map shows the location of different sites that require fresh water. Each black and white dot represents a site where a drilling or completions activity has been planned. Toggling on the location of our freshwater sources, we can start to understand the spatial relationship between where we can get water and where the water is needed. But to understand the economic feasibility of each site, we need to understand things like the drive time and distance between each possible source and destination. To do that, we can use a set of tools in ArcGIS called Network Analyst. Under our network analysis toolbar, we can see the different types of tools that we can run to generate different types of results. Things like generating drive time polygons around specific locations, generating routes between multiple locations, identifying the closest facilities, generating an origin destination cost matrix, and even doing fleet vehicle route optimization. All of these network analysis tools work on a network data set. A network data set contains kind of a road model that's been built to do the specific type of network analysis. And you can use Esri provided network data set out of the box, or even use a custom one that includes your own private lease road data. Let's take a look at what some of these outputs can look like. First, we can understand what the service area tool set looks like. In this case, we get a drive time polygon around each of our water sources, and this can help us identify potentially how many different sites each water source can service based on a 20 or 30-minute drive time, or let's say a 20-mile drive distance from each location. We can also look at something like our OD cost matrix output that helps us understand the drive time and distances between each possible location. So looking at the attribute table here, we get a record for each origin destination pair, along with a drive time and distance between each one. Ultimately, what we want to do is understand the closest or most proximal water sources to each site. And so to do that, we're going to use a closest facility analysis. And this is what that output looks like. Very similar to our OD cost matrix, but the outputs are generated along the actual road network itself. And so what we can visualize here are the actual routes that a driver would take from each source to each site. And we can filter this down a little bit. So if we look at our routes here and actually apply a definition query to look at a specific site, we can see what the results look like. So for this one particular site, I've got 10 different routes to each different source. I've got a rank, so it's actually ranking each source based on proximity. And then I get the drive time and distance to each one. Why this is helpful is it can really help me start to model different transportation costs. So if we're moving water from one source to another and we're paying maybe some type of mileage fee or we're paying by time, we can start to compare these different sources based on transportation costs with drive time and distance between them. Now, the transportation cost is not the only variable that we want to incorporate. So although it's helpful to understand from a spatial perspective which sources are the closest and what the drive time and distances are between each one, we also want to factor in additional things like the actual cost of water at each source. Because if a source is further away but has a cheaper price point for water, it might make more economical sense to drive further to get the cheaper water. So we could run this type of analysis in an iterative fashion, solving for different variables like cost, but that can get a little cumbersome and a little repetitive. So instead of doing that here in ArcGIS Pro, we can actually do this using other aspects of ArcGIS. So what we're going to do is we're going to get out of ArcGIS Pro and we're going to jump over to our web-based tool and look at a dashboard that's been configured for this type of workflow as well. And so what we have in this dashboard are some of the outputs of our network analysis, closest facility tool, along with some information about each source and each site. So looking at this dashboard, I get some summary statistics that show me how many sites we have. We have 17 different sites where we have different water management activities occurring. In this case, we have about 55 wells that need to be completed. We have an average water need per well, and then a total water need in barrels. So we have about 6 million barrels that we need to source for all of our completions activities. And what we can do in this dashboard is come over here on the left-hand side and select a site. So let's look at that same site that we looked at back in Pro. And I get a table here that shows me some of the results that we looked at in Pro as well, along with a map. So just like we saw in ArcGIS Pro, we have essentially a record for each origin destination pair. So for each pit, we can see the proximity rank, we can see the drive time and distance, and then some new information we're bringing into the dashboard here is some actual price information we're getting from each water source point feature on our map. And so what we're actually doing here on the back end of the dashboard is we're bringing together data and attributes from multiple input layers, and we're creating this result layer here on the fly in the dashboard. And what this helps us do is actually model information like water cost and price dynamically and see how that information can change as we maybe make modifications to some of the input data sets. So here in this dashboard, I'm going to unhide this little menu over here on the right-hand side. That's actually going to allow us to update our pricing information for each water source. So for instance, if I come in here and we see pit F is currently the cheapest option based on the price per barrel. Let's say that price changes from 29 cents to 32 cents. We actually want to see how that influences the overall water cost. And so what this is going to do on the back end is using a data expression in our dashboard, we're going to reevaluate all of these attributes and dynamically update the water cost on the fly. So that's going to take a few seconds to update. And while that's updating, I'll take you to the back end of the dashboard here so we can take a look at what this data expression looks like. So if I go into my table element and edit my data source, we can see here we're using a data expression. And although this might look a little intimidating at first, it's really not that complex. What we're doing is essentially adding a few different data layers to our expression here using Arcade. So we're adding our sites where we need fresh water, we're adding our water sources, and we're adding our routes that are output from our closest facility tool. And then what we're doing is we're creating a feature array, and then we're pulling in the attributes that we want from each of our 3 different sources to kind of create a layer on the fly with all of these different dynamic attributes. And what we're doing is actually doing some calculations on our attributes as well. So you can see here I'm doing a round, I'm doing a multiplication, and creating some of these attributes that don't exist in my input layers. And then finally, what we're doing is writing those outputs to a feature set here, which is going to be the data source that we use in our table within our dashboard. So that is set to refresh every roughly 6 seconds. So it's looking at all of the input data layers, and it's going to incorporate those changes that have been made to any input. So going back to our main dashboard here, we can actually see that our table is now updated. So pit F used to be our cheapest option. Now we updated the price per barrel, and we can see now it's our second cheapest option, and the price has changed by roughly $3,000. So using some of these tools, we can kind of help different analysts or users across the organization maybe compare different scenarios, see how prices change and how results change by automatically calculating some of those dynamic attributes, and using tools like dashboards and Network Analyst and Pro, we can help plan a variety of activities and then understand how those plans can change and look at different scenarios over time. Thank you.